Okay, YouTube Sirrus fanatics. Here's a look at the 2021 Sirrus X 5.0. This was one of the first ones available that came in for me after a 3-month order here on the central coast of California. And I don't think too many more have come through, but nonetheless, I got one after a long wait, and I'm glad to have got it. So it's been a great bike so far. 3 weeks I've had it today, and I've already got over 300 miles on it, so I'm riding it. I've got a good idea how it's feeling. I've already made some upgrades to it, which I fully intended to do when I first bought the bike. So some of them are pretty extreme, but nonetheless, it's kind of how I roll with this stuff. At any rate, this is the newest color. It's called Blue Tint with ice blue trim and black satin, I think is what they refer to it as. And as you can see, it's got the reflective Specialized logo that's outlined by the ice blue, and same thing up here on the X. And as you might be able to tell, you can see the clear coat in the actual blue tint is just that. It's a tint, and you can see the carbon layup underneath it, and it's pretty cool. It's a really nice looking color. What they've done is they've kind of blacked out some of the areas in on the head tube and whatnot, and the area where they have the bosses attached along the water bottle cages. Down on the bottom bracket shell is kind of blacked out in there, glossy black. It's a good looking bike. I'm pretty impressed with it, and I had no idea what it was going to look like when I ordered it. They just told me that the blue was going to be the first available. The red, I think it's called Redwood, is not going to be available until sometime after the first of the year, possibly. At least that's what they were guessing at the time. So I went with the blue, and I think I'm glad I have, because the red looks pretty cool, but I'm just not a red bike guy. I think the blue looks nicer. And when the sun goes down, or when you're in a shadow, this is kind of like the 2019 and 2020 was. It turns real dark. It almost looks black when there's a low light. So it's pretty neat looking. Okay, so some of the upgrades that I've already done. The first one, which I think is the most significant, is the crankset and bottom bracket. I have replaced it with a Praxis Zayante carbon and a 40-tooth chain ring. These are direct mount chain rings, 3-bolt direct mount, so they will utilize the original chain ring that you got with the bike, which is a 42-tooth. Specialized has the bottom bracket listed on the Carbon X, or I'm sorry, the Sirrus X 5.0 and others as the Praxis Alba, and it's not. I had a discussion with the guys at Praxis when I showed them a picture of what I had, and they said it was by no means a Praxis product. So I don't know what's going on there, but it's the same bottom bracket and crankset that they put on the 19s and the 20s, and it is the same one that was subject to the recall of, I think, 38,000 bikes because the non-drive side crank arm was falling off. A lot of people had problems, and so they fixed the problem, but they didn't really fix it. It's still the identical crankset as far as I can tell. On the 2021, but what they did, and I'm going to explain, so if you guys are intending to keep it, you'll have an idea what to expect. On the old crankset, there was an aluminum main crank bolt right here. This is actually a self-extracting bolt system, which is very typical and common on a lot of cranksets. SRAM and Specialized and others, but anyway, the original OEM Sirrus has 2 pinch bolts on the crank arm, and then an aluminum main crank bolt with only a 5mm hex that fits into this. What they did to fix the crank arm from falling off is they obviously really are sticklers about the torque values, which of course that's very important. But what they did is on that crank bolt, they loaded it with red Loctite. And that's not something that I think a lot of people would expect when they're going to pull an arm off. So what happened with mine is I was going to pull it off, And I basically just almost rounded out that little 5mm hex key because that bolt is made out of aluminum. It cannot handle the torque value that the red Loctite presents. So those of you that are going to keep the crankset on your bike, if you know, and there's really not a lot wrong with it in respect to its functionality, but if you intend to leave it, and if you do ever need to take it off, expect to put heat on that and see if you can't break that red Loctite loose, and then that way you can be certain that it'll break loose and you should be able to torque it off. But before you take on that project, I strongly suggest you order a new main crank bolt through your dealer. I tried to get one through Specialized. They never even returned my email. My dealer has had one on order for over 2 weeks. I just wanted to get one to have, even though I changed my crankset, I wanted it for the set that you know, the spare crankset I've got in case it could be used on another bike or something. And my dealer still hasn't even got one and gotten back to me on it yet. So that's the way that's going. Again, there were 38,000, I think, of those that had been recalled. So I don't even know if they're caught up to what they needed to replace on bikes that had an actual problem, because these arms were literally falling off on people that were riding. So anyway, I'm on a Praxis now. This is the M30 external bottom bracket, which is a great setup. And I'm very impressed with the cranks, and they were worth it. It's a great setup. And again, it runs the direct mount 3-bolt, so you can get different rings for these if you want. And the original 42 tooth fits on this drive. So if you want to use a 42 tooth, you can. I went to the 40. I found, after running the 42 tooth on it when I first bought the bike, I put the 40 on it to give it a try, and I like it better because it kind of fits that intermediate position between each gear on the cog. It seems like you're either in a too tall or not quite tall enough when I was pedaling on the road and on some of my hillier terrain, which I have a lot of hilly terrain here, so a 40 tooth is actually fine for me. If you're on real flat land, you're probably going to want to stick to 42. I've even heard of some people wanting to go taller than that, but for where I am, for gravel grinding and the hilly terrain and country that I live in here, I definitely was happy to drop down a little bit. Original wheels, I'm going to keep those on for a while. They're going to be replaced probably with the Revol C38s, the carbon hoops, if I don't just build my own. These are certainly adequate. They're heavy, and you notice heavy wheels. If you've ever been on carbon wheels, you'll know the difference. But nonetheless, it's a good looking wheel, and so far they're holding up okay. But you know, like I say, I've only got 300 plus miles on it right now. So I replaced the handlebars. I've got Santa Cruz carbons on it. They're cut down to 700 millimeter instead of the 680, which is what the originals were. You know, that's pretty minuscule difference. I put the Ergon GP3 handle grips on it, and I really like these because I tend to get numb hands when I'm riding long distances, and this gives me a lot of different hand positions, and they just seem to work. So I'm kind of digging the way they are right now. And original brakes. These are really adequate brakes as far as I'm concerned. I'm a hardcore XT and XTR guy when it comes to brakes on my mountain bikes, but so far with the riding I've done on this bike, I'm pretty impressed with a kind of sort of an entry-level brake, and it's pretty tough to beat a Shimano brake. They do a very good job on their brakes, and I don't see any point of me changing these in the near future. If I did, I'd slap XTRs on because those are just bulletproof brakes. But at this point, for road riding and gravel riding, these are more than adequate in that respect. So moving towards the back here, the drivetrain I've got is obviously 1x12. Originally was SLX, and I'm still running an SLX shifter up front, but I have changed to an XTR rear derailleur, and again, it's kind of what I do. I'm running XTR on all my mountain bikes, and you just can't beat the shifting and the precision that that offers. Definitely comes at a price, but I love it. So this bike, I rode it for about a week and a half, and I was actually pretty satisfied with SLX. And then I got on my XTR bike again and said, yeah, no. So here we are. I've got the XTR on there. I'm waiting for a clamp shifter. They're very hard to get right now. The clamp type shifter is definitely problematic to find, and I'm just going to have to roll with the SLX. However, I'm pretty impressed with the way this thing is shifting. When you get the two together, it actually is pretty good. But that's coming. So the original Sunrace cassette is 10 by 51, and that's the difference between the model year 19 and 2020. They were 11 speeds, and this is now a 12. And this is actually a decent cassette. I've been running these on my mountain bikes just because of the cost savings with them. I've been finding them to be pretty bulletproof, and I've got a lot of miles on Sunrace cassettes, and I've saved a lot of money by buying them. And they're not the lightest. There's definitely a weight penalty with them because they're pretty much all steel. But so far, the shifting and the gearing has been more than adequate. It's good. I like it, and I'll probably just stick with it until maybe I get my carbon hoops. And when I do that, then I'll probably go ahead and put an XTR 10 by 51 on it and really get some weight reduction on it. But it's also going to come at quite a price. So for now, we're sticking with this. The next mod I did was got rid of the aluminum seat tube or seat post, and I'm running the S-Works. It's called a Cobble-Gobbler, and these were run a lot on the Specialized Roubaix. It has an elastomer little insert there, which this whole system has some flex to it and damping, and I'll tell you, it makes a huge difference. It's not like suspension, but you'll definitely feel the damping. I have some roads that I ride that are pretty brutal, and the difference between the original and this new post was night and day. Definitely a worthwhile investment, and get them while you can, because I have a feeling they're going away. I think that they're closing them out in a lot of places, and I'm getting the impression that maybe Specialized is no longer going to manufacture that. It has a slightly different setback on it. The original seat post, I think, is a 14 millimeter setback, and this is a 25. So for what that's worth, you know, your seating is going to be a little bit different. Perhaps you can make an adjustment on your seat rails, and if you need to, maybe your head tube. But this actually fit just fine for me. I didn't have any problems making that adjustment at all. So it is what it is. The Future Shock 1.5 that they're running on this is still just awesome. I just love it. It's just makes a huge difference. I came off of a Roubaix, which I can no longer ride. I've had back surgery and neck surgeries with fusions, and I cannot ride a bike in the drops anymore. And it's just not an option for me. And then with a recent back surgery, even that seating position on a Roubaix was kind of a little bit too much for me. So hence the flat bar. And essentially they refer to this as the flat bar Roubaix because it's got a very similar geometry from what I understand. So anyway, there it is. I'm not sure if there's anything else that I'm missing on this, but if you have any questions, post them up down in the comments, and be more than happy to answer anything that you might need answered. 2021 Specialized Sirrus X 5.0.